Now let's turn to what I call the intratemporal capital structure. Now, the intertemporal capital structure is what we've been discussing in the previous videos about how capital relates to time and the fact that time is passing as we're producing things. Now, with the intratemporal capital structure, we're imagining taking a snapshot of all the capital in the economy at any point in time. And if we do that, what we're going to find is that there's an interlocking capital web. That is, that there are lots of different types of capital that all relate to each other to produce things. Now, to get a handle on this, let's think about a relatively simple product. Let's say a chair. I have a chair here sitting in my office, and it looks like it's made of a number of different things. So to make that chair, I need a certain set of capital goods. Right? I'm going to need, well, some type of energy, right? Produced, generally in an electrical form is what's going to be being used to run the machinery. I'm going to need the machinery itself. I'm going to need, it looks like there's probably steel and some form of plastic, also various pigments that go into giving the chair its various colors. Right, so I have at least these 4 different types of capital involved, along with other resources like labor, right, in order to get these things all combined in the right way if I want to get this chair. Of course, now we know that in a sense, each of these, I guess what we could call parents of the chair, also has to be produced. So for example, to get steel, we need to have both iron and coke combined. We also need to have that happen in a furnace, so there are things that we would need that I don't actually have on my list here. We know to get plastic, we need to have oil, but that oil has to be refined in a particular way and processed, so we actually get plastic in a usable form. But naturally, the machinery would have to be produced using things like steel and energy and various other things. So, if we were to build this up even more, we would have all kinds of parents, grandparents, great-grandparents for this chair until we trace everything back to things that do actually exist in nature. So, the point here being, in a sense, every product has a family tree, and that family tree can be extremely complex, especially once we start working back down it and realizing that while steel may be used to produce chairs, it's also used to produce other things. Like, for example, steel and energy in some combination is used to produce engines for cars and motorcycles and lawnmowers, for that matter. Right, so we have all of these different products that are interconnected, and as we draw lines up and down, we'd end up with a capital web with all these different products, right, being interconnected with each other, where some things are used to produce other things, and some things can be used to produce more than one thing. Everything that is produced, more or less, needs to have multiple things that go into that product in order to be able to produce it. Right? There are all of these complicated relationships that happen within the economy between these different types of capital, which is really the point that I'm trying to pull out of this interlocking capital web. Right? That capital is heterogeneous. That is, there are different types of capital, and they're not completely interchangeable. Now, to a certain degree, there is some interchanging that we can do. Right? I can, for example, in many uses, I can swap out steel for plastic and vice versa. Not for everything, but for a lot of things I can swap out steel and plastic. Right? But at the same time, we know they're not quite perfectly interchangeable, right? Which suggests that we need to have the right kind of capital, or at least a right kind of capital, to get the stuff that we want, right? Put another way, I can't drive through Burger King and order a BMW. Right? They simply don't have the capital that it would take to make a BMW. Right? So we need the right kind of capital to get the right kind of stuff. Right? Capital and the product that capital produces are very interconnected with one another. Now, it sounds kind of weird for me to really be going on and on about the importance of realizing that if you want to have French fries, you need a deep fryer and potatoes rather than coal. Yet, at the same time, this is something that it seems that policymakers seem to forget. Right? For example, we have cases where we do foreign aid. Right? So we give countries money to help them develop, and we end up seeing all kinds of ridiculous projects happen as a result of this. For example, we get refineries that are built in the middle of the desert with no way to get oil to them. Right? This is a total waste of resources, because in order for resources to be useful, we have to combine them in ways that will actually produce something that consumers want. Right? And that's an important point here. That really, if the purpose of our economy is to try to produce things that will actually serve consumer desires, we need to have a means for consumers to communicate their desires, and for our entrepreneurs to understand that and to make sensible investments. And that's really ultimately what supply and demand are all about. Supply and demand giving us prices, giving us, in the end, profits, tells entrepreneurs what they should produce and what they should not produce, and gives them the means to produce those things that should be produced. Now, when we start trying to make policy absent all of these things, absent price signals, absent profit and loss, we often will make these kinds of mistakes where we get a total waste of resources because we're not really considering how things are going to connect to actually serving consumers that are willing to pay for the product. So, to wrap up some stuff about capital, a major point here is that really it's not just product value, like some dollar figure that's totally abstract, nor is it just capital value that's totally abstract either. Instead, what matters is the value of a very specific product that serves a specific need that consumers have. And in order to make that product, we need a specific type of capital, or a specific set of types of capital that are capable of actually producing that product that consumers would like to have. So it's very important to keep that in mind, and this is something where it's very easy, I'll warn once again, especially for macroeconomic policymakers, to forget this, to act like all we need is more investment. Well, that's not really true. What we need is investment in the right kinds of capital to produce the things we want. Right? So this idea that it's just if we just invest enough in capital we're going to end up wealthy is totally false. Instead, what we need is the right kinds of capital. And to find out what the right kinds of capital are, we really need market signals in order to guide us in the direction that consumers would like to see things go.